Hello and welcome to the RPTS webinar series. We're honored to have you joining us today as we talk about a unique and different topic, perhaps something that we have not given consideration to in the past. Specifically, we're speaking about ministering to those in the military services. Historically, only those of us who lived in military towns had the opportunity to serve those in the military. But today, our forces are used in different ways, with the predominance of those in the reserves. Probably most of us know at least one person active on active duty somewhere, either in the country or outside of the country. Based on those facts, there are probably some things that we can learn on how to help those in the military, and specifically ministering to them. We have a couple of experts in that topic with us today. Noah Bailey is the pastor of the RP Church in Enid, Oklahoma, and Vance Air Force Base is located right there. So he has a lot of practical experience in ministering to military families. He's joined today by Bill Wagner. Bill Wagner's an elder and a retired lieutenant colonel of the U.S. Air Force. He's got several decades of experience both in and around the military, and particular has participated in several church plants, one in Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, and several here stateside also. So our experts here have prepared for us a very good presentation, and Noah and Bill, your computer is set. You should be ready to go, so I'll let you take it from there.
Very good. Well, one of the things that I think is ironic to start with is that Bill here has 26 years in the Air Force and been part of 3 Reformed and Presbyterian church plants in the Air Force bases. I, on the other hand, am in my 3rd year. So we have someone who's very green and just beginning, but someone who's a veteran. So we'll see how this works out. The first thing I want you guys to notice when you look at the opening slide, this is ministry to the military. Some reflections that Bill and I put together on an expensive work, something that takes a lot out of you, but is worthwhile, is worth the investment. Notice this picture here. The aircraft has a name on the side of it. Lieutenant Commander Pete Kramer Hansen, U.S. Navy. Pete Hansen is a member of Enid Reformed Church. The thing to remember is these are photographs that we have from Enid Reformed Church. This is a work that's not theoretical to us. We didn't sit around and debate it and discuss it in our session meetings. It's not something we sat around and dreamed up in our seminary studies. This is something that has names and faces. Lieutenant Commander Pete Hansen is not the one sitting in the cockpit, however. That is Second Lieutenant Ben Slicker. He was an adherent at Enid Reformed Church for almost 2 years before he moved on to Little Rock to learn how to fly the EC-130. And Ben Slicker was a joy to disciple him, to mentor him, to welcome him into his home. These are people who are very real for us. So the principles we explain are not simply pie-in-the-sky principles, but they're things that have names and faces and stories behind them. And so I think it's a fundamentally practical work that we have in mind this afternoon. All right, let's get started. There's one caveat to keep in mind, something important, sort of a disclosure, if you will. Bill Wagner's experience all comes in the United States Air Force. My very limited experience all comes in the Air Force and Vance Air Force Base specifically. So we're going to give our principles from our story, from our experience, which is namely the Air Force and specifically Vance Air Force Base. So you'll have to take the principles home with you. You'll have to think about them. And you'll have to come up with your own creative ways to apply them to the Marines, the Army, or to various contexts that you may face. So these principles are going to have all Air Force illustrations and explanations. But given your opportunity and your context, you can certainly think through what creative way to apply these principles. All right. The slide pops up all there at once for you. They the military need something distinct and specific. They need the means of grace. That is, military people are sinners, and they need the love of God, His favor, His smile, His embrace. And the means of grace are what He's given to us for that end. So they also need a loving family. They need something that's stable, something that's secure, something that's predictable, and something that's reliable. And God's given to us in that end a loving family. They also need devoted discipleship. They need someone who can take them by the hand and walk them on a path of holiness. Somebody that can lead them toward Christ, to becoming more like Christ. So in summary, our contention, our belief is the experience we have, they need a Reformed church. A place that has the means of grace, a place that has a loving family, a place that has some devoted discipleship. Now, there's some key reasons why they need these three things. We'll look at these first. First of all, the military are people too. So they are human, and they have these basic needs that everyone else has. The basic needs that they have are things like grace, so they need the means of grace. Things like love, so they need a loving family. Things like holiness, so they need discipleship. You have in front of you Major Brent Drown. And yes, he sits in a big jet and he flies really fast. And it's exciting, and it's an adrenaline rush, and it's a thrill, and it's a dangerous, exciting job that most of us don't get to have. But you also see there he has Kimberly and Hadley and Nathaniel and Madeline. He also is a dad and a husband. And so he needs grace and love and holiness. He needs to be instructed and led and counseled in how to be a husband and a father. He's a person too. He needs these things just as everyone else does. This is what it is to be human, and the military are people. They need these things. In needing the means of grace, we're speaking about things that are very specific, things that are laid out particularly in Acts chapter 2, where there's the Word. This is God speaking to His people. It needs to be read and to be memorized. There's almost no better tool to fighting the warfare of the mind than Scripture memory. If we fill our minds with the language of God, then it's very hard to have the language of the world or of self rambling around in our brains. And the military especially needs that. They need, like other people, to read and to memorize the Word, to fill their minds with it. But we also need the Word running around in our souls, our hearts. It's not simply enough to fill our minds with it. We need to fill our hearts with it. So that's why we sing the Word. In singing the Psalms, we commit to the heart's memory the singing of God's Word. But we also need it applied in ways that we might not have thought of, ways that we don't self-examine all the time. And so the Word needs to be preached to them. This is what we mean by the means of grace, these fundamental things that everyone needs. Prayer, the assaulting of the heavens, the moving of the heart of God to do His work and His will in this world. In the same way, the humbling of our hearts, the bringing down of our wills. This is what military needs. Believe me, living in a community with Air Force pilots, they need to have their hearts humbled. So they walk in these ways, praying to the God of heaven without ceasing. We need to teach them these things. The sacraments, they need to be washed and they need to be fed. They need to be marked as belonging to the church. This is true of every people, every person, and every people group, but also the military. They need fellowship. They need that accountability, that brotherhood. They have a great camaraderie, which we'll talk about more in a bit. But that camaraderie sometimes works for evil purposes. And so there's a need for a camaraderie, an encouragement, a brotherhood of holiness and of sanctification. So they need this means of grace. They need this wholehearted effort and investment into the things that God, Jesus Christ Himself, has promised to bless. And we'll look at a little bit later at what are the unique barriers that the military has to the means of grace, and then we'll consider some solutions to overcoming those barriers and meeting the needs of the means of grace. But first, let's look at the other thing they need, a loving family. They need spiritual fathers and spiritual mothers, those who will correct and counsel, those who will guide their steps and give them wisdom and insight, There's some awfully big career decisions that are given to young men who don't know their way in the world. They need good counsel. They need direction. But there's also a great need for spiritual siblings, brothers and sisters who will put their arm around them, encourage them when they're defeated and frustrated, who will keep them going on the path. Well, they'll need a spiritual feast as well as a physical feast. You see the Wagner's table there stretched out and filled. Our bodies need food and our souls need food. And the Lord designed a table to meet these needs, where conversation can be had and encouragement can be exchanged, where laughter and smiles can pass from one plate to the next. And in feeding the soul and in feeding the stomach, we feed the whole man. This is something that's needed. But above almost anything else, the military members need something safe and stable. Perhaps no other job has something that is so mobile and so dangerous. These guys get paid to be shot at. These guys get paid to be moved all around the world. They get paid to fly through the air, and they may fall like a stone. And so they need something safe, something stable and predictable. God designed the family to meet these needs, to provide spiritual relatives, to provide a feast for the soul and the body, and to provide something safe, something secure. And so they need this loving family. They also need devoted discipleship. They need brothers for encouragement, fathers for counsel and correction. If you look over there, there's Matt and Bryce Hollow with their arms around each other. It's a great picture. This is what brothers need. They need this encouragement. They need Matt to come along and show Bryce how to make model airplanes, how to throw them across the room. They need that, spiritually speaking, of course. But this is what brothers need. We need fathers for counsel and correction, to give direction. Now, this is not only true of the guys, it's true of the girls. They need sisters to encourage, to inspire. They need mothers to counsel and correct. Paul gives us the model in 1 Timothy. The older women are to teach the younger women. The elders for oversight and accountability, to give their heart and their time to their people, to look over their shoulder. That's what overseer means, to look over the shoulder, to gaze down on the work at the hands, to give counsel and encouragement, to direct their work. And there's something else. This is true of every people group, but especially the military. This discipleship needs to be persistent. There needs to be a pursuit, a hunt. You have to hunt for your people. You have to chase them. They don't come willingly. Sheep don't just come when the whistle is called. But you have to walk and chase them and pursue them. There's something that is required in this hunt for your people, for the pursuit, especially with the military. You need to enter their world. If you're going to minister to people in D.C., you've got to learn something about politics. If you're going to minister to people in New York City, you got to learn something about the Yankees. And sadly, if you're going to minister in Boston, you got to learn something about the Red Sox. But anyway, to learn something about the Air Force, about the military, you have to enter their world. You have to learn their language. You have to learn how to speak. And, sometimes that means using a lot of letters without any words. You have to use the abbreviations. You learn to speak their language. And in that way, you learn their heart, their trust. And you can speak to them about what they love and know. Another key about entering their world is the military tends to be technologically on the edge. And that's not simply because they have taxpayer dollars. They're technologically on the edge because they're global, because they move everywhere. And so to stay in touch with anyone in a meaningful way, you're going to have to know how to text. You're going to have to know how to send an email. You're going to have to know how to Skype. To enter into the world of a military personnel, you have to have a little bit of technology experience or understanding so that you can chase them down, so that you can follow them all over the world. And this perspective, this global perspective, is something to keep in mind when you talk to a military member. Most members of the military don't have a single place that they can call home. They move around too much. They go here, they go there. And the reality is, they're almost citizens of the world, as it were. Not that they don't have fierce and patriotic loyalties to America, but they also have a great love for the Alps that they once lived in, or Japan or Korea, or wherever they were stationed. They lived in a place that was beautiful and they loved it. And so they have, or tend to have, a more global vision of the world. And this is something to keep in mind when you speak to the Air Force. They often, or the military, they may often have very little connection to the local community, and yet they may have a whole world within their purview. Something to remember as you're trying to relate to these people. Now, they are people, but they're people with unique situations. You'll notice the Vance, the VN on the wing there, on the tail, 25th Fighting Squadron. It's pretty exciting to see our jets overhead. We hear the roar of their engines, and it's, I don't know, at least for this guy, it's exciting to see these jets flying along and racing along. And it's a unique thing to be able to fly a jet hundreds of miles an hour. It's a unique thing to go into combat and get shot at. It's a unique thing to drive a tank. So there's unique problems and barriers that come with military service. Now, they're ordinary people. They're people too. And so they need grace, the means of grace. They need love, a loving family. They need holiness and righteousness, someone to disciple them. But they also have these unique barriers. Their unique situation with their unique challenges put up hindrances, barriers, things that make it hard to get to the grace, the love, and the holiness that they need. Let's consider a couple of these. Number one, hindering the means of grace. There are these things that come into the life of the military that makes them hard to get to the means of grace. I don't mean to imply that the chaplaincy is such a thing, but the chaplaincy illustrates for us how difficult it can be to get to the means of grace. There's a fundamental need for the chaplaincy. Churches rarely exist in combat zones. It's kind of difficult to maintain an established presence in an area that's getting shot at regularly or bombed. So the front line, the combat zone, is a place where churches can't really exist. Now, if you go to Afghanistan and places like that, warfare is changing. There are local churches. But attending a local Afghani church would have too many barriers and too many risks. There's the language issue, the culturals and custom issues. It would be very difficult to actually go to a local Afghani church and be able to overcome the barriers necessary to receive the means of grace properly. In the same way, could you imagine the effect on the Taliban if they learned hundreds of American soldiers went to a local church in Afghanistan? It'd become a target. There's too many security risks with them going to these local establishments. In this way, in combat zones, on the front lines, chaplaincy is important. It's something that brings to these people the means of grace. But there's a challenge to the chaplaincy. It illustrates for us that in combat zones, it's hard to get to the means of grace, so they provide the chaplain service. But part of the other issue is when you come back home, there's a challenge for the chaplaincy. It cannot exercise church discipline. It's not a church. It can't throw people out. It can't bring people into covenant. It doesn't have the authority of the elders. So there's a limitation to the scope of what the chaplaincy can do. It can bring the word, of course, and it can bring the sacraments into combat contexts, but it doesn't exercise church discipline. Likewise, and I use this just to illustrate, it cannot fence the table or openly practice the regulative principle. Most Reformed and Presbyterian chaplains are labeled Protestant and asked to lead through the Protestant service. Protestant, of course, has a very wide definition and a wide sense of meaning. And so things like fencing the table or the regulative principle of worship are very hard to practice and very difficult to observe. And increasingly, in the New World, chaplains are being forced to choose between conscience and country. Chaplains are being asked to reckon with the challenges of a nation that no longer hold the positions that are believed by many denominations, especially the Reformed and Presbyterian ones. So chaplains are forced to choose between the conscience and the country. This makes it very difficult to focus on applying grace to the lives of sinners. So in this way, we have for us the chaplaincy illustrating some of the barriers. Military members go where it's hard to be part of a local church. It's just difficult. But then the chaplaincy and the benefits that it brings cannot still bring to bear all the means of grace that the church bring. The chaplaincy cannot be a substitute for the church. It's insufficient. And so we have here illustrated these two problems, these hindrances to the means of grace. Now, there are barriers to a loving family as well, hindrances that keep people from having a loving family. If you look at the picture there, there's a for sale sign in front of a house. And we joke from time to time that in a military community, the second most common flower is a for sale sign. This house is sitting right next to the Drown's house. And before too long, the Drowns will have a similar sign in their front yard. This is the reality of life near a military base. For people who do not have families, who are singles, the service can be brutally lonely. Even Bill and I have just known a young man who was here in Enid who showed remarkable side effects of isolation. The military can be isolated by living on base. They just don't have the connection with the local community. The base is designed to provide almost everything that they need, from the chaplaincy to the commissary. Almost everything that they could need to buy or receive could be done right on base. And so if you live on base and remain on base, there's very little reason to come off. And there's this isolation that can take place. And since humans, by design, tend to hang out and socialize with those that they are most like and best understand, there's an association that happens. And so while the Air Force and the military hang out with themselves, there's an isolation that again results. Isolation by lifestyle, the military are forced to live a particular lifestyle. They have to wear the same certain outfit or clothing day after day. They don't get to choose. We joke about the Air Force going to work in their pajamas. That marks them. You'll know them immediately in the community. They have a particular schedule throughout the year or throughout the day or throughout the week that marks them distinctively as Air Force. Isolation by economics. It's very common. I wasn't quite prepared for this one, but it's actually very common or odd how the military can receive a very different economic standing from the locals. They may live in a very poor neighborhood and be paid very well, comparatively speaking, or they may be stationed in a wealthy area and make comparatively nothing. And so the economics can create an uncomfortable barrier between the military and their neighbors. This isolation, of course, produces some loneliness. But the service can also have a brutal effect on the families. It can tear families apart. Military service members give long hours and long weeks. It's a very demanding job, and that leaves very little energy to come home with. Frequently, they're forced to relocate. They're reassigned to a new base, a new location. They hop from city to city across the country, across the world. This frequent relocation leaves them little opportunity to put down roots, to become established. They're also frequently deploying, that is, leaving their families altogether to go into combat or to go into an unsecured location. These military members are going into a stressful and dangerous situation, leaving their wife and their children in a stressful but slightly less dangerous situation. The families are also torn apart by another force. In the military, you're asked to give your life, to take your life and put it into another man's hands. And his life in exchange is put into yours. This exchange of trust, this camaraderie that is born, is very understandable and natural. As a result, though, some men choose their comrades over their families. It's easier and more comfortable to remain with the guys that you work with all day, whom you trust your life to, than it is to come home to the family that you're not around hardly. And so families can be torn apart by this. These are some of the barriers, some of the hindrances to having a loving family, to being part of a family as God designed it. There are also barriers to devoted discipleship, things that keep them from following after holiness. I categorize them in two ways. First, they are transient. We spoke about this under the families. They're constantly, or regularly, I should say, relocating and deploying. This moving around a lot, this being very mobile, prevents roots. It results in brief and often broken relationships. They're not allowed to build deep and lasting relationships, or if they do, they have to have them stretched and sustained only by technology, because they're very far apart and have very little face-to-face time. Also, in these transient times, it leaves them most connected to few sanctifying influences. They don't have long-standing church relationships. Those are the ones that they're leaving all the time. They don't have long-standing community relationships. The long-standing, deepest, and most lasting relationships, outside of perhaps the home, are their coworkers, who may be very depraved and have an incredibly negative influence on them. The other reality of the military service is these few sanctifying influences are the ones you're trusting day after day. You have, as a Christian in the military, this unique challenge of looking at someone you may identify as not loving Christ, as being very depraved, and yet you have to trust that person with your life. Yet you have to depend on that person to come through for you in the end. And this creates a very difficult challenge for many believers. But the military also tends to be driven, very aggressive. They chase the career. You see the wings there pinned on the chest of Ben Slicker. This is a high and hard to achieve goal. This is something to be labored for and pursued. But once you get your wings, the game only begins. Then you have the rest of your career to move up the ladder, to get the degree, to get the right assignment, to pursue a command post. And chasing the career is an honored and encouraged pursuit. In the same way, there are a few adrenaline rushes like flying a jet at several hundred miles an hour. And so for those pilots who are seeking the fighter, the F-16 or the F-22, they're looking for this personal satisfaction, this joy and delight in their job. Even those who fly big heavies get a thrill from flying through the air and having this be their career. So chasing a career of promotion and constant escalation, there's near constant pressure to be better and better and better, to improve. And there's near constant pressure to find delight and joy in what you do, to be satisfied with your work. These are good things. But when they come to dominate and overwhelm someone, it's hard to focus on anything else. They also chase the camaraderie of building this trust. It's so dependent. It's so important. If they don't trust each other, they won't endure. This is how lives are lost, by not trusting each other. And so they're driven and focused on maintaining their camaraderie, on being satisfied with their work, on pursuing their career and advancing. But with this transience and with this overarching focus, the military members end up with very little time or energy to give to holiness, to give to devotion, to God. So this leaves us with this position. This leaves us wondering, how do we get over these barriers? How do we pass these hindrances? They need Jesus. That's how we do it. We can and we must overcome the hindrances and the barriers. You have before you a funnily outdated picture of Enid Reformed Church. We've lost some of those that you see there. We have gained many that you don't see there. They come and they go. They're mobile. They're deployed. They're relocated. We've lost touch. We've gained touch. It's this ebb and flow. Every time we make a new picture once a year, it's a radically different church with radically different people. But the thing that remains the same for that group is Jesus. He's the one thing that stays the same. So here's some practical ideas that we have found at Enid Reformed Church for bringing Jesus into the life of the military, giving them the means of grace. First, use military bases as church planting targets. If you look at this map, it's not a fancy one, it's not very big, and it only has major active duty Air Force installations. No Marines, no Navy, no Army, just active duty Air Force, no National Guard or reserves. But look at them all. Look at all the Air Force bases. Imagine if we had actually filled it up with all the bases. There's almost no limit. There's these bases everywhere. And if we use them as church planting targets, places to go and to focus on, then we have for us a natural asset, a natural ally in reaching out to the military. But there's something else. A lot of these bases, if you had looked at the map, might be near your church already. Identify local military installations. To give the means of grace, the people need the church. So we need to plant churches where the military bases are, but we should also identify the military bases which are near our churches. So let's research some inroads. If you look at the pictures there, you'll notice that Da Vinci's Coffee House is a very popular spot for our young pilots to drink coffee and study. If you want to meet pilots in Enid, go to Da Vinci's. The wives and their children, they go to the splash pad when it's hot. They go to the library year-round. Their kids play. And so we have this opportunity to get with the military, to find where they are. Find ways to get on base. Find community activities, community events. Find a base calendar online and look through the ways to get on base. Contact the PR department for community events. Contact the chaplain's office for volunteer opportunities and ways to minister on base. But even still, discover the off-base hotspots. These are the ones I just mentioned for Enid. Da Vinci's, the library, the splash pad. There are lots of different places where the military has as their hotspots, the places they know, they trust, that people speak well of, that they go to. Create a global network. I know it sounds silly when you're like wondering how to get onto a local military base. The thing you have to realize is the military is a very close network, and it's a relatively small network, all things considered. It wouldn't take much information, just a few people here or there, to be able to begin to pinpoint all these different places around the globe. We have people in England and in Germany. We have people throughout the U.S. who were once part of ERC, Indian Reformed Church. They moved. We are building a global network. And so now we're finding that if we send a guy off here, we know the churches that are in that area. If someone comes in, they know there's a Reformed church in Enid. The word travels fast along the global network. So reach out to the military people you do know. You may be surprised how many are actually connected to people on that base. So in giving the means of grace, we need to get our churches near military bases. That takes some church planting. But in giving the means of grace, we also need to identify the military installations around us and find ways to get on their base and ways to get with them off base. In giving them a loving family, we need to open our homes to the military. We need to pour out the glass of cold water. We need to set the table and feed them well. We need to consider to welcome them. That is with acceptance, but without performance or critique. The military thrives on critique. It's what makes them excellent and what makes them strive to be better, to achieve even more. But if you welcome them and give them a break from the constant critique, the constant examination, and just allow them to rest, they find joy in this. They find joy and they come back. Feed them. The military, wandering from place to place, often may seem as strangers with no sense of a home, no place that they can call their own, no roots. They're constantly being uprooted. So feed them. Give them a table they can call their own. Give them a table that they can delight in. Fill their stomachs and you will fill their hearts. Kid them. Have fun with them. Let them play. There's these simple joys in life to see these pilots who are just stressed and strained and worried about big things and big fears rolling on the floor with children. It's a beautiful sight. It's something that's so critically important to their souls, to their hearts, that they need. Let them have these simple joys of playing with children. And set the example. You've heard some of these challenges of being moved around constantly, not knowing when or where. Be the example. The godly marriage, the godly parents, they need to see. They need to know what it's like. They need to have someone set the example so that they can create the shadows, so that they can mimic and follow in the footsteps of godliness. This way, open your homes to the military. Welcome them in, feed them, and give them a place of joy, a place of quiet, a place to play. But also give them devoted discipleship. Make disciples of the military. This is a thing that they need, to have brothers who encourage, Brothers who put their arm around their shoulder and say, keep going. Don't lose heart and don't become frustrated. They need fathers who counsel and correct, who will guide their steps and give them good wisdom, who will direct them in how they should go. They need to be people who will chase them, who will pursue them, who will have a commitment and a zeal to them. People who don't give up. This is important. They move around, they are tried and they are tested and stressed, but we cannot give up on them. You see there Bill Wagner standing with Jeremy Jones. Jeremy worshipped at Union Reformed Church when he was learning to fly. Then he too moved away. He was stationed for a little while in Little Rock, Arkansas. Bill loaded himself and me up into the RV there, Snoopy, flew us over to Arkansas, and we sat with Jeremy. We chased him. We had to hunt him down. We had to show him we weren't going to give up. And you know, there wasn't any great, exciting lightning bolt experience, but he knew we loved him. He knew we cared. He knew he was welcomed at our table. He knew if he wanted love, grace, or discipleship, he knew where to find it. It wasn't confusing because we were the ones who chased him. We were the ones that said, you're important enough to spend the time and the money and the energy to find you. Ministering to the military, to tie it together. It's expensive and it's intense. It costs something. It really does. It costs you time, it costs you money, it costs you energy and effort. This is not an easy work. This is something that takes a listening and loving heart, something that takes a pursuit and a passion, something that you have to give yourself to and realize that the return that you get will move away. You won't have a lifetime or even generations of watching fruit after fruit, but you will have global networks. You will watch as they move and transform families and people in Tacoma, Washington, in D.C., in England, in Germany, in Korea. As they move all over the world, you'll find that you have friends and neighbors and loved ones all over the world wide because they were once in your village, in your town, and you loved them, you listened to them, you fed them, you clothed them, and then they moved on to do the same for others. It's expensive, it's intense, but it's worthwhile. And it's the work of the church. This is the work of the church. This is the critically important thing for us. They need a reformed church, something that gives the means of grace, that provides the love and favor of God through the means that He ordained for showing such love. They need loving families, that the relationships that He designed to be safe and secure, to be comfortable and delightful. They need this devoted discipleship, those that He has called to lead and to direct, to take by the hand, and to teach to be holy. So here's our points again. Hopefully it's been driven home time and time again. In the military, the means of grace can be hard to get. They go to places where they are rarely or incompletely dispensed. So plant Reformed churches near the military. And if you're a Reformed church, find the military who are near you. Reach out to them. Find roads into their world. A loving family is hard to keep. They move around a lot, and they're stressed, and they're strained by their work. And there's this constant pull away from the family, away from the home. So we need to open our homes to the military, to bring them in, to draw them in. The joke we have at Union Reformed Church is that we're the amoeba. We swallow families whole. It's what they need. It's what they need to be swallowed up into an embrace and into the love that the church has. And for everyone, but even in the military, learning to be like Jesus is hard to do. It's difficult when you're surrounded by few sanctifying influences. It's hard to do when you're being tested and driven to perform. It's hard to do when you're measuring the world or being asked to measure the world by standards other than Jesus's. And so we need to make disciples of the military. We need to put our churches near them. We need to open our homes to them. We need to walk with them toward Jesus. All right. Let's look over some questions here.
Very good. And this is a time, folks, where you can use that chat box in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. You can type any questions that you have, and we'll get those sent over. We've got a couple already, and I'm sending a few more on the way right now. While we're giving the guys a chance to take a look here, I do want to give thanks to RP Missions. They provide the platform for us to do these monthly webinars, and we are very grateful for their cooperation. So thank you to Matt Filbert and those on the board. We are very appreciative. You have one question there so far, I believe, and then a couple more streaming somewhere between Pittsburgh and Oklahoma. So depending on how fast Verizon is, we'll see how quickly they get there.
Well, I'm going to take that one. The question is, how does don't ask, don't tell policy impact the chaplains today? I was talking to a Baptist chaplain just a couple of months ago, asking him how the repeal of don't ask, don't tell would affect him, given his conviction. He's a very conservative Baptist pastor, and he actually lives just a couple of houses down from Noah across the street. His daughter used to babysit for our Bible study. So I was talking to him and asking him that very question. He said that as it is right now, they will not. They still have the ability to act according to conscience, and if there's going to be homosexuals that come to him, then he is allowed to say to them, I don't believe in that, but I'll refer you to somebody who does, who may be able to give you a different perspective. And in this case, obviously, a non-biblical type of perspective. But he can act according to his conscience, at least now in the short term. The long-term impact is certainly uncertain. The reason for the chaplaincy, and one of the problems with the chaplaincy, is that they exist not to glorify God, but for the morale of the troops, the stated objective of the chaplaincy. So then chaplains can end up in subtle ways not making grade, not making rank, because they do act according to conscience, and they do confront with the sin that a person has committed, because that's what's creating the problem that they're coming to the chaplain with. But the inclusiveness of the military means that the chaplain is having to walk a fine line between being convicting of sin and the inclusiveness of the military.
Yeah, I think the hindrance that we spoke of to the means of grace associated with the chaplaincy is in part where they get located, combat zones, things of that nature. But there's also to the military a very secular and very pluralistic motivational side to the society there. And that requirement to be pluralistic and secular forces a very delicate tension for chaplains. And so they have that freedom to act according to their conscience. As I mentioned, we don't know how long they may have that freedom. It may be taken from them. Pray not. But in the meantime, they have a very difficult tension of maintaining their conscience in this context.
That question also brings up something that Noah alluded to about planting churches at military installations, that because of the deficiencies, because of the non-biblical nature of the chaplaincy and the chapel on base, then it becomes necessary to plant churches. My former pastor from over in Germany is actually in the process of doing that. Doug Hudson has a program now of trying to get Reformed and Presbyterian pastors to plant churches near military installations. So that's a good name to remember if you're interested more specifically in how to handle those, to make that happen, then Doug Hudson would be the name to Google on the web.
I believe his website is MinistryToMilitaryInternational.com or .org.
All right, you've got several more questions coming, and while you get an opportunity to take a look at those, I do want I'll point you back to your computer screens, and you'll see next month on December 1st, again at 3 o'clock, Pastor Harry Metzger of the North Hills Reformed Presbyterian Church here in Pittsburgh, and he's also a board member here at the seminary. He's going to be speaking on the topic of reinvigorating your devotional life. He titles this From Discipline to Joy. Heard part of this at a family camp recently, and I would strongly encourage you to attend this webinar or listen later if you're not able to be there on December 1st. You will be convicted and encouraged both. What a great message that is, to be convicted and encouraged at the same time as you think about your relationship with our Father. And I think we've got a couple more questions there.
I'm not seeing your emails come through, Mark.
Okay. One of them specifically said, what Bible study materials might you recommend that are specifically geared toward the military?
Well, that's a good question. From our personal experience, we use the Bible in Westminster and have found them to be very sufficient tools for men in the military.
I'll jump in, and I don't mean to interrupt Noah here, but historically the Bible study that we've been doing over the last, it was about 5 years, and then we established the church. What ended up bringing guys in was just good, hard Bible study. And so the old commentators, the old commentators were working for us. And so Matthew Henry is a stable, John Calvin, and going into a book of the Bible and drawing on the resources of the past and those good commentators has been something that historically has drawn guys in. They want good, meaty stuff. They don't want flippin' lighthearted stuff. So that's where I would, I think that historically that's worked for us. So that's where I would continue to put our emphasis here.
Another question that came through is what recommendations do you have in helping soldiers returning from combat and dealing with post-combat stress, issues like that?
Oh, very good question. I asked a Marine chaplain friend of mine similarly, and I think probably the best I can do is sort of pass along what he said to me. And he said that there's two things they need to understand about who they are, that they need a gentle and compassionate and patient reminder of two facts about their identity. The first is that they are soldiers. That makes them agents of the civil magistrate who has the power of the sword. That their work in taking lives and seeing lives taken is work that is done for the authority that God ordained to do that work. They're not there as individuals. They're not there as men acting on their own might or their own wisdom. They are acting on behalf of the authority that God ordained. And they need to remember that what they did on behalf, or what they saw on behalf of the civil magistrate. It's very important to remember their identity, that they are agents of a proper authority figure, not acting on their own authority. The other thing he said they need to remember then is that they're Christ's, that they need a gentle and constant reminder that they belong to Jesus, and that whatever fears and concerns and doubts they have, both now and relative to the battlefield, are ones that Christ himself has known, ones that Christ himself has been through, and that he knows the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, who can bring them peace. And that's who he sent to us, a Comforter who could bring us peace again. In some ways, often, I think they need someone who will listen with love. Someone who will listen with love and understand. And I realize it's hard, for most civilians, it's very hard to be in that position. It would be hard to get a military member to trust you, to get them to believe you could even begin to understand what they've been through. And I think part of the reality is we can't. We civilians can't. We haven't been there. But we can still listen with love and be patient.
So that family atmosphere ends up engendering the getting back into the culture, getting back into their normal lives, and in an atmosphere where they realize that they truly are cared for, unlike the atmosphere that was presented to them over in the combat zone. So that family overtone certainly helps to reintegrate the soldier back into society.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for your time. You've put a lot of work into thinking through this and have really given us something to think about that will enable us to better serve those who are serving us through their military duty. I think an appropriate way to end this webinar would be a comment from one of the listeners here. I just want to thank you for your work. Our son is in the Army, serving right now in Afghanistan. Their church family embraced them as soon as they moved to Fort Hood, and their ministry to our son's family has been invaluable. Friendships, discipling, help for our daughter-in-law now when our son is away. I am deeply grateful, and I'm sure that this sentiment is echoed by many families across the country. Well, we thank you all for listening, and we would ask that you remember to tune back in a month from now, December 1st, and we'll be listening to the next installment of the RPTS webinar series. God bless you and have a good day.